I'm willing to bet you've never heard of this technique before. It's so universal that you can apply it to just about any and every game that you're a part of. If you don't know, my name is Synchro and I am a competitive Yu-Gi-Oh player. As such, for the majority of this video, I will be using my hobby as the baseline for explaining this technique. Now hold it right there. If you're on the computer, move away from the mouse and keyboard, or if you're watching this on your phone or tablet, just scoot away a little bit, shut up, and listen. As I said at the start, this technique is universal. It's not restricted to just my niche. Hell, you can even apply this in parts of your day-to-day life. That's how good this is. While I am going to try to explain this technique in more Yu-Gi-Oh terms, I'll do my best to keep it to a minimum to make it not too confusing for all of you non-Yu-Gi-Oh players. And if that's you, first off, how the hell did you find this video? Second off, welcome to my channel. Be seated, or standing since that's apparently better for you. Grab a pen and paper, and get ready to write stuff down. Class is now in session, so stay down. Standing up is better for you, my butt. Okay, I get it. Now get out of here. Freaking internet. Okay, so the technique I'm going to be sharing with you is so powerful that every top tier gamer has either used it or has become aware of it at some point. This is something that proves just how good you are at the game you play. Mastering this skill will not only increase your skills, but put you at an elite level. You could even say this is something that has existed for thousands of years. Alright, we get it now, tell us already, god dang it. Okay, but first, watch your language. Now then, the technique I'm going to be sharing with you is called assigning your role, or better yet, Who's the Beatdown? Who's the Beatdown is an article that was originally made by a guy named Mike Flores, a competitive Magic the Gathering player. Yes, that's right, this concept was first originally made for Magic the Gathering players, but other players from other games have found a way to translate this into their own hobby, Yu-Gi-Oh included. Mike's blog is considered to be one of, if not the most important article for any card game ever. So I'll leave a link to it down in the description below, or you could click right here. Despite it being a Magic the Gathering blog, it's still worth a read. So what this article explains is that in any given game, there are two roles players are trying to fight for, and that is the beatdown role and the control role. Now real quick, in terms of card games, we actually have a couple of different types of decks from stuff like aggro, mid-range, and control. I want to quickly clarify that when I'm talking about a control deck, I'm not just referring to the control type deck. That's not how this works. Anyway, whenever you play against someone, you have the job of trying to figure out which role you and your opponent are going to be. And most of the time, you want to be trying to be aiming for the control role if possible, because the control role has the one dominating invisible attribute, inevitability.
I am inevitable.
Yeah, and I'm SynchroGuy. Get the hell out of here, Thanos. Sorry about that. So as the word implies, inevitability means you're going to eventually win. So what about the player that has the beatdown role? Does that mean they're always going to lose? Not necessarily. The person that has the beatdown role can still win, but they have to steal the win. Or in other words, they have to beat the control player as quickly as possible. Because, again, they have inevitability. Seriously? I swear, it's like what happens when you say Beetlejuice's name 3 times. God dang. So one way to look at this is to figure out who wants to stall out the game as long as possible and who wants to end the game as quickly as possible. The control player wants to stall into the later game because that's when their deck will be at its best and they will have achieved victory at that point. The beatdown player wants to end the game before that happens. Figuring out which role you are is important because it will determine how you should be playing your turn. Not only that, but it can also help determine how you should be building your deck. Like if you know your role is mostly going to be the beatdown role, then you might as well throw in some cards that can help you end the game quickly. Right? Like back row removal, kaijus, track cards, or anything that can get you that quick and easy kill. Win, I mean, not kill. We don't kill each other, Yu-Gi-Oh! There's no such thing as a Shadow Realm. There's no such thing as a Shadow Realm. Now here's a question. Let's say a combo deck, a deck that can set up a board of big strong monsters if it doesn't get interrupted, goes against a control type deck, a deck that uses a bunch of track cards and anything else to try to keep the opponent from playing. Which of these decks gets the beatdown role? The answer? The control type deck. As I said before, just because you're playing a control type deck doesn't mean you get the control role. The reason the control type deck gets the beatdown role here is because they're trying to beat the combo deck quickly. Why? Because that deck has a higher power level ceiling than it does. So the control deck wants to lower that ceiling to their level. I mean, think about it. If you had the power of inevitability, then why would you want to lower your opponent's power level ceiling? I mean, you're going to win regardless, so it seems kind of unnecessary. Unless you're some kind of sadist. Excuse me. Oh, that came out of nowhere. Here's a good way to try to figure things out. Imagine if these two decks faced off against each other using only their engine cards, which are cards that are part of the deck's gimmick or archetype. And let's say they play more than one game, like 5 games, 7 games, 10 games. The one that wins the most games should be the deck that assumes the control role. If that's a bit hard to imagine, then don't worry, there's plenty of other ways. Here's a checklist for you. If a deck has inevitability, tries to increase its card advantage over decreasing the opponent's resources, is proactive, makes bigger plays per turn, special summons more, takes fewer risk, or plays fewer defensive cards, then it's the control deck. On the other hand, if the deck depends on winning quickly, aims to lower the opponent's resources, is reactive, makes small plays per turn, special summons less, takes more risk, or plays more defensive cards, then it's a beatdown deck. You don't need to have all of these things checked off to determine who's which role, just one of them is enough. Now at times, these roles can be automatically fixed when you know which decks are facing against which. However, it is possible for decks to switch roles at any point during a duel. What? Heck, even the die roll for determining who's going to go first might determine which role you're going to play. Let's say I go first and I establish a board of big strong monsters that can also negate a bunch of your plays. In that scenario, you will want to try to survive my onslaught of monsters early on until you get the cards you need to break apart my board, or reduce my life points down to 0. For me, I will be okay with using my negations early on if that would mean I could close out the game quickly. So here, I'm playing the beatdown deck and you're playing the control deck. Now let's reverse it. Let's say we're playing the same decks, but this time you went first. Instead of doing what I did, you use some cards that keep me from being able to make that same board while using cards that can inflict damage to me. I'm hoping that way each passing turn, I can make a small play that can make it so I can deal you more damage, or draw into a card that can get rid of your cards that are keeping me from doing my combo. Whereas you're hoping that I don't open said cards so you can end the game quickly. Now here, you are the beatdown deck and I'm playing the control deck. But as I said before, the roles can switch at any point at any turn, depending on the situation, sometimes even more than once. And if you ever hear expert players talking about how skillful a format was, they're probably talking about how often the roles could switch. Say for example that I'm the beatdown player and you as the control player managed to out my board. But then I noticed that you only have 3 cards left in your deck, while I still have 12 cards left in mine. If I could survive the next couple of turns and force you to attack out, then I'm going to win. Now suddenly, I'm the control player and you're the beatdown player. Figuring out and assigning your role is not a one-done deal. You have to be constantly asking yourself at every turn which role you possess. And it will require you to take into account all the options that are still available for you and your opponent. Be careful though, because if you misassign your role, that can lead to a game loss. You want to know something scary though? It's entirely possible for a player to possess both the beatdown role and the control role at the same time. What? If you're on the opposite end of that, then you're in what we call a bad matchup. If your deck is not able to put up a strong board with a higher power level ceiling that your opponent can't overcome, then you can't assume the control role. Subsequently, if your cards are too low in quality that you don't have any room to put in some 9 entry cards to lower your opponent's ceiling, well then you can't play the beatdown role either. At that point, you're SOL, and you should probably consider reworking your deck. It's like if 2 boxers face up against each other, but one is in a higher weight class. Who do you think is gonna win? So, did you get all of that? Now, I know this is not very easy to learn right off the bat. Hell, I'm still trying to master this skill myself. However, by actively practicing, you will develop a keen observation. As I mentioned at the beginning of the video, you can apply this skill into other games or even some parts of your day-to-day life. For example, in a sports game like tennis, if you are more physically fit and conditioned compared to your opponent, well then you're favored to win if you guys are just going to a head-to-head game with no tricks. You can even use this technique in business negotiations. If you hold some kind of leverage over the other party, then the longer the negotiations go on, the more opportunities you have to bring up this leverage to try to get some value from it. The control role. But if you're in a more desperate position, you may want to end negotiations as quickly as possible, because if the other party brings up something that you can't compete against, well then you're in for a bad time. The beatdown role. There's more examples I could share, but I think you have the general idea. Who's a beatdown is such a useful skill that can be used in just about any kind of competition. If you can figure out your role, you can figure out what it is you need to do. And if you're in a bad matchup, you can at least figure out what you need to improve on for next time. Thank you guys for watching. Be sure to hit that like button, comment down below if you like these kinds of videos, and be sure to hit that subscribe button so you get more of your daily dose of Yu-Gi-Oh goodness. I'll see you guys in the next one, and I hope you have /had an awesome day today.